The thunder came first, low and long, like something ancient awakening beneath the earth. Then the wind followed, howling across the dry hills with a fury that made shutters rattle and dust swirl like spirits in flight. Elijah Cain stood in his doorway, a rifle in one hand, the other resting loosely on the frame, eyes squinting into the shifting night. A desert storm in late summer always came fast and mean, and something about this one felt wrong. Lightning split the sky, and in that momentary flash, he saw her, a small figure, barefoot, staggering, limping through the sagebrush at the edge of his property line. Her shape was hunched, silhouetted against the pale burst of light. For a second, Elijah thought she might be a coyote, the way she moved, low to the ground. But then she collapsed, hard, didn't move again. Elijah didn't hesitate. He was down the porch steps in 3 strides, boots pounding across hardpan. Rain had just started to spit, big drops slapping against his hat brim. By the time he reached her, she was face down in the dirt, hair plastered to her skin, breathing shallow. The left side of her dress was soaked in something darker than rain. "Hey," Elijah said, dropping to one knee. "Hey now, can you hear me?" The girl flinched as he touched her shoulder, not from pain, from memory. Then with trembling effort, she rolled halfway onto her back. Her face was young, 16 maybe, 17 at most, with high cheekbones, cracked lips, and wide, dark eyes that locked onto his like a hunted animal. She tried to speak, but only managed a rasp. Then she did something stranger. She pointed behind her, toward the hills, and whispered one word, "Coming." Another flash of lightning. Elijah turned. At first there was only darkness. Then, there it was, faint against the ridgeline. A flicker of torchlight, moving. Then another, 6, maybe more, riders, advancing. "Elijah," he muttered to himself, rising fast. "What the hell have you stepped into now?" He scooped the girl into his arms. She cried out softly, more in fear than pain, but he tightened his grip and sprinted back toward the house. Rain fell harder, slapping his neck and soaking through his coat. The wind howled like a dying thing, rattling the tin roof as he kicked open the front door and shouldered it shut behind them. Inside, the lantern still burned on the kitchen table, casting a warm golden glow across the cabin's sparse interior. Bedroll, cast iron stove, shelves of dried goods, a Bible on the mantel. Elijah lowered her gently onto the rug near the hearth. Blood bloomed from her side, a deep gash, clean and straight. Not an accident, a blade. She clutched his arm weakly. "Don't give me up." "I don't even know who you are," he said softly, crouching beside her. "But I ain't ever given someone up who came bleeding through my storm." She stared at him for a long second. Then her eyes fluttered shut. Outside, thunder again. Louder now. Elijah rose, grabbed the rifle from the door, and moved to the window. From the dark edge of the ridge, the torches were closer. 6 riders, for sure. 7, maybe. Keeping distance, watching. They hadn't followed her all the way to the porch. Not yet. He stepped to the back of the cabin and lifted a trap door near the pantry. The old root cellar he hadn't used since spring. Cool, dry, dark. He returned, lifted the girl gently, and carried her below. She didn't wake, but she whimpered as he laid her on the cot down there. "You stay quiet," he whispered, more to the dark than her. "Whoever's out there ain't come for the weather." He came up, shut the trap door, dragged the rug back over it. Then he waited. The knock came 15 minutes later. Not a fist, the butt of a rifle, sharp and deliberate. "Elijah Cain," a voice called. He opened the door part way, stood there, lean and tall, rifle in plain sight but not raised. 3 men on horseback, 4 more further back. One stepped forward. Older, dressed in a black coat, with a star pinned to his chest. Shined too much, to be honest. "We're looking for a fugitive," the man said. "Young Indian girl, escaped custody, violent, dangerous. You seen anything?" Elijah met his gaze. "No visitors here, just the storm." The man looked past him into the cabin. "Mind if we take a look?" "I do." "You refusing to cooperate with the law?" Elijah took a long breath. "I'm refusing to let 7 armed men storm into my home because of a storm-soaked hunch." One of the men behind the leader laughed under his breath. The leader didn't. "We got authority to search every homestead within 20 miles, he said, "then come back with paper that says so." Rain pattered harder on the porch roof. One of the horses shifted and snorted. The leader stared at him for a beat too long. Elijah stared right back. Finally, the man tipped his hat. "We'll be back. I'll be here." They rode off, slow. Not in retreat, in warning. Elijah watched them until the torchlight vanished into the dark. Then he shut the door, bolted it, and leaned back against the wood. He could feel it now, the weight of something big, something coming. The girl hadn't just run. She'd survived something, escaped something, and whatever she'd escaped from, it wasn't done with her yet. He looked toward the rug covering the cellar door, then up at the storm pressing against the windows. "Damn it," he whispered to the empty room. Outside, thunder cracked like the earth splitting in two. The storm rolled on through the night, but by morning the skies had cleared. A brittle stillness settled over the Cain ranch like dust over a forgotten book. Birds returned in cautious notes. The scent of damp earth rose from the fields. But Elijah Cain couldn't shake the weight in the air, a pressure that said something had broken and nothing would go back the way it was. She hadn't stirred when he checked on her before dawn, only muttered something in a language he didn't know. But now, in the half-light of morning, he heard a rustling below. Elijah pulled back the rug and opened the cellar door. She was sitting up, barely, wrapped in a wool blanket, skin pale beneath the dirt and bruising. Her eyes flicked to his as he descended the steps with a tin cup of water and a chipped plate of beans and bread. She tensed, still afraid. He crouched and offered her the water first. She hesitated, then took it with trembling hands. Sipped. "Slow. Name's Elijah," he said. She didn't answer. "You don't have to talk, but if you do, I'll listen." Still nothing. He slid the plate to her. Her fingers hovered over the bread, like she thought it might vanish if she touched it too fast. Then she ate. Small, efficient bites, the way starving people do. Her cheek was swollen near the jawline. A yellowing bruise bloomed up her throat. Her left arm bore a rope burn so raw it hadn't scabbed over yet. Elijah swallowed hard. She hadn't just been running. She'd been hunted, owned. And somewhere out there, someone still thought they had a claim. He stood and turned to leave, but her voice stopped him, dry as ash. "Naya." He looked back. She stared straight ahead, not at him. "My name's Naya." Elijah gave a slow nod. "All right, Nia. You're safe here. I won't ask what happened till you're ready to say." She didn't speak again, just lowered her eyes and curled tighter into the blanket. By mid-morning, he let her come upstairs. The fire was going, coffee on the stove, and the ranch quiet. Too quiet. Even the cattle seemed subdued. Nia sat on the edge of the cot near the window, watching the horizon like it might grow teeth. She never asked to go outside. Never asked anything. Elijah cleaned out the cut on her side. She winced, but didn't flinch. The wound was healing clean. Whoever had hurt her had meant to hurt, not to kill. He left her clothes by the hearth. A plain shirt, loose cotton trousers, and a belt to cinch them. She changed while he stepped out to chop wood, more out of habit than need. The rhythmic swing of the axe steadied his thoughts, though nothing could settle the rising question in his mind. Who was this girl, and what kind of men hunt someone with federal stars and no legal warrant? When he came back inside, she was staring at a carving on his mantel, a smoothed ironwood sculpture of a horse with its head bowed, its flanks branded. "You make that?" she asked quietly. Elijah nodded. "A long time ago. It looks sad." "Maybe it is." Nia looked away. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "My father carved horses like that. Before they took me." He paused at the stove, the coffee suddenly forgotten. "Took you from where?" Nia closed her eyes. "Montana Territory, North Ridge. They came at night. White men wearing paint, shouting in Apache tongue. But they weren't Apache. My father knew. So did I." Elijah moved slowly, sat across from her. He didn't speak, just let the silence stretch. "I was worth more alive," she said, after a long time. "That's what one of them said. She's young, strong, no scars. She'll fetch a fine price." Her hands were clenched in her lap. "They kept me in a wagon for 5 days, then a holding barn, then somewhere worse." Elijah stared into the fire, jaw tight. She turned to him. "You didn't ask where I came from." "No." "Why?" He shrugged. Figured asking's what got most men into trouble. That brought the faintest flicker of a smile to her face. Faint, but real. He poured her a cup of coffee. She took it, hands steady now. "There's more," she said, and Elijah knew she was giving him something fragile. "I'm not just a girl they took," she whispered. "My father's a chief." Elijah blinked. "Which tribe?" "Don't matter," she said sharply. "If word gets out I'm alive, and who I am, it won't be just a rescue. It'll be a war." That changed everything. Elijah leaned back in his chair, the floor creaking beneath his boots. No wonder those men wore badges but acted like wolves. They weren't chasing a fugitive. They were burying a secret, and he'd just dug it up with his bare hands. That night she slept upstairs, though her sleep was shallow. Elijah could hear her whispering in dreams, names, pleas, warnings. He sat on the porch, rifle resting across his knees, eyes on the ridgeline. A coyote howled far off. Then silence. The kind of silence that comes before something breaks. He hadn't planned on taking in anyone. Hadn't planned much at all since the war ended, and he hung his hat on this piece of dirt. But he knew one thing deep in his bones. Whoever hurt that girl would be back. And next time, they wouldn't just knock. By morning, the sky was bruised with ash-colored clouds, and the wind had a new voice, low and restless, like something was coming that didn't belong. Elijah Cain stood near the corral gate, eyes fixed on the hills beyond the dry creek bed. Nia stood behind him, wrapped in one of his old coats, her hair braided tight, her gaze sharper than the air. "They're watching," she said. He nodded. Saw 'em last night. 3 torchlights had flared along the northern ridge, too far to hear but close enough to see. They hadn't come closer. Not yet. Elijah looked over at her. They'll come in daylight. Men like that don't hide when they think they own the law. And sure enough, just before noon, the dust rose. 5 riders, single file, slow and confident. One held a U.S. territorial badge, glinting like fool's gold in the noonday sun. Another wore the black coat of a federal marshal. But the way they sat their horses, too casual, too relaxed, told Elijah what he needed to know. These weren't lawmen. These were predators dressed in permission. He stepped onto the porch as they approached. Naya stayed inside, not hiding, watching. The lead rider tipped his hat as he reined in. "Mr. Cain," he said. "Marshal Grady Trent. Appreciate you coming out peaceful-like." Elijah didn't answer. The second man leaned forward in the saddle. Older, sun-scarred face, gray mustache, one hand resting near his holster. "We're following up on a fugitive, young female, native, escaped lawful custody 2 nights back. Dangerous, potentially armed, might have passed this way." Elijah's voice was flat. "I've seen dust, coyotes, and more fence posts than I care to count. No people." Trent smiled, thin and polite. Strange, a ranch this isolated, seeing nothing but dust. Elijah held his stare. "Not much traffic on my land." The third man, younger, cocky, spat in the dust. "Maybe we should check the place." Elijah's tone didn't rise, but something in it turned the air colder. "You boys got a warrant?" The fourth rider laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "We're out here under federal jurisdiction, don't need paper when we're tracking federal property." Elijah stepped off the porch. Now they all had their hands on their weapons. He moved slow, deliberate, toward the hitching post. Tied there was his mare, still saddled from the morning ride. He untied the canteen and took a drink, slow as molasses, never taking his eyes off them. Then he said, quiet and steady, "That girl ain't property." Every rider shifted. Grady Trent's smile disappeared. "I didn't say she was. You called her a fugitive. She is. You called her dangerous. She might be." Elijah let the silence hang, then said, "And yet you're nervous." The older man with the mustache cleared his throat. "You got a reason to protect her, Mr. Cain?" "No more than I got reason to trust men who carry law badges but speak like slavers." That stopped them. The fifth rider, silent until now, finally spoke, voice calm, even educated. "We know who she is, Cain." Elijah glanced at him. "We know she's not just any girl. We know her father's name. And we know what happens if word gets out. She's still breathing." Nia appeared in the cabin doorway then, wrapped in Elijah's coat, hair loose around her shoulders, face calm but eyes burning. The riders tensed. She didn't speak, didn't have to. The educated man looked at her. "You understand what you're doing, girl. There's no court that'll protect you. Your father's already considered hostile to the territory. You step 1 foot into town, and it's treason charges for whoever harbors you." Elijah stepped between them. "Then maybe you best ride on, before somebody starts thinking those badges are just decoration." The silence stretched, and then the one with the mustache nodded once. "We'll be back, and next time we won't knock." They turned their horses without a word, riding off slow but tight. Not in defeat. In calculation. They weren't gone. They were regrouping. Elijah didn't move until the dust settled. Only then did he turn to Naya. "You all right?" She nodded once. "They'll try again, but louder." "I know." That evening, Elijah unpacked the old trunk in the barn. Inside, a Colt rifle, cleaned and oiled, a leather bandolier, 2 Claymore tripwires from his days guarding rail lines in Apache territory, 1 bundle of iron spikes. He didn't like what this meant, but liking had nothing to do with it. Naya stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You were a soldier." Elijah didn't answer. "You fought in the border raids." Still, he said nothing. "I heard stories about you." He looked up. "What kind of stories?" "The kind where men survived when they shouldn't have, where fires came from nowhere, where tracks vanished overnight." She stepped inside, her voice low. "I thought you were a ghost." He gave her a sad, half-smile. "Feels like I've been one a while." She nodded toward the rifle. "You plan to kill them?" "I plan to give them a reason to stay dead." That night, as the last light fell behind the hills, Nia carved something into a piece of pine with Elijah's hunting knife. When he asked what it was, she said only, "A signal." "To who?" She looked up. "My people." "You said they thought you were dead." She nodded. "They did." Then her voice dropped, low and certain. "But they'll know this mark." And Elijah understood. He wasn't just keeping a girl safe. He was holding the match at the edge of dry kindling, kindling soaked in blood and years of silence. If these riders came again, this time they wouldn't be alone, and neither would she. By sunrise, the land lay still. Too still. The breeze barely moved the grass, and even the birds kept their silence. Elijah Cain stood near the outer fence line, jaw tight, his boot planted beside a fresh print in the dust. Not a horse, not a boot heel, moccasins, more than one set. He crouched, fingers brushing the edge of the print. No spurs, no drag marks. Whoever had passed through his pasture last night had moved with care and purpose. Behind him, the wooden post creaked. Nailed into it was a narrow pine shard, carved with symbols, Nia's carving. But now it glowed faintly with red pigment, a handprint smeared across the bottom edge. Elijah didn't know the language, but he understood the message. She was claiming her name, calling her blood. He turned toward the house, heart already pounding. Nia sat on the porch, staring at the rising sun. She didn't turn when he approached. "They came last night," Elijah said. "I know." He sat beside her, laying his rifle across his lap. "Friends?" Her silence answered. "Why not tell them where you were?" "I needed to be sure first," she whispered. "Of what?" She turned to him, eyes sharp in the morning light. "Of you." That stung more than it should have. Elijah didn't reply. She pulled something from her pocket, a beaded strip of leather, worn but sacred. It bore the insignia of 2 crossed arrows over a rising sun. "My father gave me this before they took me." "You said he was a chief." "I said he was a father," she corrected, then added, "He's both." Elijah nodded slowly. "And that makes you?" "A daughter of the Wind Valley Nation," she said. "The only one." Elijah's gut sank. He'd heard of Wind Valley, a proud but dwindling tribe, hidden in the northern hills, kept their peace by staying out of everyone's way until the rail companies started pushing east. "They said you died," he murmured. "I let them believe it." Her voice was steady now. "The men who took me, they worked for someone bigger. Territorial contracts, fake warrants, badges that meant nothing. They weren't just catching girls, they were making ghosts. Elijah stared out at the horizon. And if word gets out that one of those ghosts is alive, there'll be fire, she said, not from my people, from the ones who want me dead. He ran a hand down his jaw. The men who came yesterday, they knew your name. They don't need me. They need me gone. If I vanish, there's no testimony, no witness, no tribal claim to the land under that treaty, and no one to stop the steel from cutting through the valley. So you're not just a girl running. No, she said. I'm the reason they started hunting. Later that day, Elijah went to the barn. He needed to move, to think. He fixed a broken rail, mended tack, cleaned out the feed trough. But his mind kept circling the same thought. He wasn't prepared. He'd seen war before. The real kind, the kind with uniforms and flags. But this was something else. A war with no lines, no uniforms, just lies and silence. A war where girls were stolen in the dark and sold before sunup. Where lawmen wore stars they didn't earn, and justice came only if someone bled enough for it. He was deep in thought when Nia appeared at the barn door. You ever killed a man who deserved it? She asked. Elijah turned slowly. Yes. Did it feel right? No, he said, but it felt done. She stepped inside. When I escaped, I took something, not just my name. She pulled a folded piece of parchment from beneath her coat. It was blood-stained, torn at the edge, but the writing was clear. Signatures, ledgers, freight, manifests, and one name repeated across them all. Marshal Elias Hartling, Chief Enforcer for the Territory's Mining and Rail Security Council. Elijah's mouth tightened. Hartling was no lawman. He was a contractor, the kind of man who put ink on paper so others could bleed for profit. And he had real power, military, federal, political. He's the one who ordered me taken, Nia said, who branded me a fugitive after I got free. You kept that paper all this time. It's the only thing that proves I was real. Elijah took the paper gently. This is enough to bring the whole system down. That's why they'll kill you too. He chuckled dryly. They've been trying to kill me since '63. Ain't got it right yet. Nia's face softened, but only for a moment. They'll be back, Elijah. I know. And next time, they won't pretend. That night the wind changed. Not just a shift in weather, but something older. A tension in the soil, a breath held. Elijah sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle. Nia sat opposite him, her eyes distant. I remember the sound, she said. What sound? When they came for me, it wasn't shouting or gunfire. It was the horses, dozens of them, moving slow, surrounding everything. Then silence, then screams. She looked up. When my people hear that sound again, they won't run. He nodded. Good. She leaned forward. Do you believe in justice? I believe in balance, Elijah said. Justice is just the name we give it when it leans our way. She smiled, faint and sad. You talk like a chief. He stared into the fire. I'm just a rancher. No, she said, not anymore. The morning came with dust, not the idle breeze-swept kind, but the heavy galloping kind that rose from 100 hooves and settled like judgment on the land. Elijah Cain stood by the well, coffee in hand, rifle leaning against the post beside him. His eyes were fixed on the ridge east of the house, where the dust cloud grew by the second. Nia was already outside, silent as ever, her braid tight, her coat buttoned. She didn't ask who they were. She knew. They ride like they know this land, Elijah murmured. They do, she replied. That's my uncle in front. Elijah squinted. The riders had slowed now, cresting the rise in 2 columns, disciplined, deliberate. At the center, one figure rode slightly ahead, face painted in black ash and ochre. Even at a distance, Elijah could feel the gravity he carried. You called them. I carved the mark, they answered. Elijah took a long sip of his coffee, set the cup down, and picked up the rifle. Then I guess it's time I meet the family. They didn't dismount right away. Riders surrounded the ranch at a distance, eyes alert, bows slung, rifles across saddles. These weren't raiders. They were warriors protecting something sacred. At last, the lead rider approached slowly, reining in 10 paces from Elijah. He was older than Elijah expected, maybe 50, with a face carved by sun and grief. His expression was unreadable. His eyes were not. Nia stepped forward, placing a hand over her heart. Uncle. The man dismounted. He approached her slowly, as if afraid she might vanish like a smoke dream. Then he reached out, and Nia stepped into his arms. He held her tightly, eyes closed, one hand resting gently on the back of her head. She's alive, he said, voice rough. By the sky, she's alive. Elijah looked away. When Nia finally pulled back, she gestured toward him. This is Elijah Cain. He found me. He kept me hidden. The man turned, walked slowly toward Elijah. You took in a hunted girl, he said, knowing what it would cost. I didn't know who she was, Elijah replied. Didn't need to. The man studied him for a long time. Most men would have handed her over. Elijah's voice was low. Most men ain't me. The man gave a faint nod. My name is Koa, war chief of the Wind Valley Nation, and uncle to the only surviving heir of my brother's bloodline. Then his expression darkened, and the men who took her, they ride still. Not for long, Elijah said. By noon, plans had been made. Koa and his riders would escort Nia north into the canyons beyond the Blacktooth Range. There, she could reunite with what remained of her people. The evidence she carried, Hartling's ledgers, would be protected by tribal elders and delivered to federal investigators already sympathetic to the cause. But getting her there meant crossing 20 miles of open territory, and Hartling's men would be watching every road. They'll come here first, Elijah said. They always do. We ride now, Koa replied. We don't wait. Nia stepped between them. No, she said. They'll follow us if we all ride together. They'll know I'm with the war party. Her gaze turned to Elijah. They don't know I'm still here. Let them think I never left. Koa shook his head. Too dangerous. She's right, Elijah said. Let them chase ghosts through the canyon while you circle wide. I'll hold the ranch, long enough to draw them in. Koa looked at him hard. They'll kill you. Elijah shrugged. They've tried before. Nia's voice was tight. You don't have to do this. I reckon I do, he said softly. This land took everything from me once. A wife, a brother, 20 years I can't get back. But it gave me one more chance to stand for something. I'm not letting that pass. She stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. Elijah, she whispered, don't die for me. He covered her hand with his. I ain't dying for you. I'm living for what they didn't break in you. By late afternoon, the riders were gone, vanished into the hills, leaving only tracks and fading hoofbeats. Elijah remained alone at the ranch. He boarded the windows, checked the rifle, laid tripwire by the northern fence and buried iron spikes beneath loose soil by the corral. Then he sat on the porch, cleaned his boots, and waited. The sun had just begun to dip when the first shot came. A crack that splintered the wooden fence post behind him. He didn't move. Another shot hit the water barrel. Then the voices. "Cain, step out. We know you've got her." He stood, rifle resting on his shoulder, eyes scanning the ridge. 6 riders, maybe 7. 2 dismounted. 1 walking toward the porch with a star pinned crookedly on his vest. Elijah raised his voice. "She ain't here. You expect us to believe that? You expect me to care what you believe?" The man with the star stepped closer. "You're harboring a fugitive. That makes you an enemy of the territory." Elijah's voice dropped. "The only law I follow is the one that don't let me sleep at night if I break it." The man drew his pistol, but Elijah was already moving. He dove behind the trough as bullets erupted, shattering porch beams and peppering the house with splinters. He fired twice. 1 rider dropped, screaming. The others scattered, but they didn't retreat. They regrouped and came harder. They swarmed the porch in minutes. 2 from the left, 1 from the barn. Elijah took the first with a clean chest shot. The second grazed his arm. The third clipped his leg. He stumbled back into the house, barred the door, and dropped behind the overturned table. His breath was ragged now. Blood soaked through his shirt. He was slowing. They kicked the door open. Elijah raised the rifle, but it clicked dry. Out. The last man stepped in, revolver raised, smile twisted. But before he could pull the trigger, a sharp crack echoed through the room. His eyes widened. Then he dropped. Behind him, a silhouette lowered a smoking pistol. Nia. Dust in her hair, coat flapping in the breeze, eyes blazing. She crossed the room in seconds and knelt beside Elijah. "I told you not to die for me." He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "You came back. Not for long," she said, pressing cloth to his leg. "Just long enough to finish this." Outside, more hooves echoed, but this time they didn't belong to Hartling's men. They belonged to the Wind Valley. The mountain had come, and this time it wasn't whispering. It was roaring. The blood had dried stiff on Elijah Cain's shirt by the time he could stand without falling. His left leg throbbed like something alive beneath the bandages Nia had wrapped, and every breath scraped his ribs like sandpaper. But he was standing, barely, by the time the hooves started again. This time, they weren't galloping. They were marching. Slow, steady, countless. The sound reached him first, vibrating up through the soles of his boots, where he stood leaning against the porch post. Nia was beside him, wind lifting strands of hair from her braid. Her jaw was clenched. "They're not my uncle's riders," she said. "This is bigger." Out beyond the ridge, dust rose in wide arcs, not the tight funnel of a single war party, but the broad sweep of a full tribal force. And at the center, a figure rode draped in black and crimson, a white horse, a federal standard pinned to his saddlebag. "Who the hell is that?" Elijah muttered. Nia didn't blink. "That's General Edwin Rusk." He looked at her. "Rusk? From San Miguel?" She nodded once. "He backed Hartling's land contracts. He signed the seizures." "Elijah Cain," a voice boomed from across the yard, deep, clear, and military. "You are ordered to surrender yourself to federal custody. The girl, too." Rusk was close now, less than 40 yards out, seated like a statue on his spotless horse. Behind him, rows of mounted riflemen in crisp uniforms lined the rise. No slavers this time. These were soldiers. You're in violation of territorial law. Rusk continued. You've aided a known fugitive, fired on federal marshals, and obstructed a legal investigation. Elijah leaned heavily against the post. Funny how the law only shows up after all the bleeding's done. I'm authorized to burn this land to the foundations. Rusk said, You and the girl have one chance. Lay down your weapons. Step forward. Elijah didn't move. Nia took a step forward. Elijah. No, he said hoarsely. Not yet. He limped back inside, disappeared into the barn, returned with a long bundle wrapped in oilcloth. She watched him unwrap it, layer by layer, until the glint of old brass caught the sun. A signal horn. Military issue. Relic of a past life. He held it for a moment, then raised it to his lips and blew. One long, haunting note. Too short. Silence. Then thunder. Real thunder, but not from the sky. From the hills. Nia turned toward the western ridge. Dust billowed. Dozens, no, hundreds, of riders emerging over the crest like spirits risen from the stones. Painted faces, flying hair, bows and rifles and spears held high. The full strength of the Wind Valley Nation had come. At their front rode Chief Tacoma, Nia's father. He didn't need banners. The way he sat, his horse, said everything. Rusk's line faltered. His officers barked orders, hands flying to rifles. But the tribe didn't charge. They rode down slowly, fanning wide, encircling the ranch. From behind the porch, Elijah could feel it. The shift. This wasn't a rescue. This was a reckoning. Rusk called out again, this time less confident. You're surrounding federal authority. This is an act of war. Chief Tacoma dismounted. He walked through the dust alone, head high, leather cloak trailing behind him. Nia stepped down to meet him. Father and daughter embraced in silence. No words, no tears, just two halves of something broken made whole again. Then Tacoma turned to face Rusk. You lied, he said, voice clear across the yard. You signed death warrants with forged seals. You took my daughter and branded her a fugitive. You sanctioned men like Hartling, men who carved profit from our bones and called it progress. Rusk's hand twitched on his reins. This is treason. No, Tacoma said. This is truth. From inside his cloak, he pulled a small leather satchel and tossed it onto the ground between them. Rusk didn't move. Elijah. Nia whispered. Elijah limped forward and opened the satchel. Inside, papers, dozens, names, transfers, payments. Hartling's ledger was only a piece. This was the mountain, and every one of Rusk's soldiers could now see it. Whispers ran through the ranks. Even from here, Elijah could see the shift in their posture. Some recoiling, others exchanging uncertain glances. You gonna burn the ranch now? Elijah called. Rusk didn't answer. Then one of his lieutenants dismounted and walked toward the ledger. He picked it up, flipped through the pages. Sir, he said quietly, these are real. Rusk's face twisted. That's stolen property. No, Nia said. That's evidence. That's why they hunted me. Not for what I did, for what I knew. The lieutenant looked at Elijah. You were willing to die to protect her. No, Elijah said. I was willing to live for what was right. The lieutenant turned back to Rusk. Sir, I can't be part of this. And then, the unthinkable. He turned and walked toward the tribal riders. One of Rusk's men raised his rifle. Tacoma's hand shot up. "No blood," he said. "Not unless it spills from the guilty." Rusk's voice cracked like a whip. "You're all fools. You think Washington will care? You think they'll believe the word of a savage over mine?" Naya stepped forward, her voice like ice. "You're not the voice of law. You're the echo of theft. You're a child." Rusk spat. "I'm the daughter of the wind," she said, "and you have already lost." He drew his pistol. That was his last mistake. A single shot rang out, but not from the tribe. Elijah Cain stood at the edge of the porch, smoking rifle in hand. Rusk crumpled beside his horse, pistol still in hand, dead before he hit the dust. The silence after was deeper than any storm. Tacoma bowed his head. Naya's shoulders sagged. Elijah slowly lowered the rifle. "I didn't want to," he said quietly, "but he made it easy." The sun broke over the ridge in streaks of crimson and gold, washing the land in a light that looked too pure for what had happened just hours before. Elijah Cain sat on the edge of his porch, blood dried in a stiff crust down his sleeve, leg wrapped tight, a fresh bandage over his ribs. He held a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Across the yard, the dust still settled in uneven drifts over the spot where Rusk's body had fallen. Someone had covered him with a canvas tarp, but no one moved to bury him. Let the vultures decide what he was worth. The soldiers had not fought. After Rusk fell, their weapons had dropped like stones in a riverbed. A few had tried to protest. Fewer still stayed loyal. But the truth, once shown, worked its way like a splinter, hard to ignore, harder to live with. And Elijah had watched them all, some ashamed, some just relieved that someone else had made the hard choice. Now the tribe was breaking camp. Warriors moved quietly through the gray light, tending horses, packing supplies, not retreating, just moving forward. The kind of quiet that comes after a fire. The kind that says, "We're still here." Nia stood near the corral, speaking softly to her father. Chief Tacoma wore a bone necklace over a dark tunic, his face unreadable. He held her shoulders as he listened, not as a warrior, but as a father trying to reclaim years lost to silence. Then came the rider. Dust kicked up along the old wagon trail, a lone figure in a government-issued coat. Not a soldier, a woman, maybe 60, hunched in the saddle, a satchel at her hip, and a faded federal seal stitched across her collar. She rode slow, without fear, like someone with business no storm could shake. Naya saw her first. "That's Agent Marin," she said quietly, "from the Bureau of Civil Disputes." Elijah stood, his breath catching as the woman dismounted without help. She didn't greet anyone, just walked straight toward the porch, opened her satchel, and pulled out a bundle of papers. She spoke to Nia, not to Elijah. Her voice was firm, clipped, bureaucratic. "You were declared deceased by territorial report 4 months ago. Case sealed by Marshal Hartling under emergency order. No further investigation permitted. You understand what that means?" Nia nodded once. "It means I wasn't supposed to survive. It means," the woman continued, "that your existence now makes every seizure order under your father's name invalid, including the Wind Valley mining contracts and all 3 railroad cuts through tribal land." The agent turned to Elijah. Her eyes were hard, but not cruel. "And you fired on federal officers. You interfered with active pursuit." Elijah didn't blink. I'd do it again. I know, she said. Then she sighed, pulled another document from her satchel. This is a federal pardon, signed last night from Washington after our riders intercepted a report from Fort Dalmore. Seems someone had already mailed evidence, with affidavits. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You? The agent shook her head. Your war chief. She turned back to Naya. You'll be summoned. There'll be hearings. Men in rooms who'll try to make you small again. Don't let them. I won't. And the girl? Elijah asked softly. Agent Marin tilted her head. What girl? Then she handed the papers to Nia and rode away without another word. That afternoon Elijah walked with Nia through the north pasture. The land quiet, except for the hiss of wind over dry grass. She's not wrong, he said. They'll come for you with pens instead of rifles next time. I know. You ready for that fight? She looked at him, eyes dark but bright in the sun. I wasn't ready for any of this. Doesn't mean I didn't survive it. They stopped near the fence. The wind carried the faint smell of horses, cedar, and ashes. You could stay here, Elijah offered, the words feeling heavier than he expected. Plenty of work. Land's not going anywhere. She gave him a small, knowing smile. You already know I won't. He nodded. You got your people. Your blood. She turned toward him. But I've also got yours now, whether you like it or not. He tried to chuckle, but it caught in his throat. Damn, girl, he said. You talk like family. Maybe I am. They stood a while longer, neither speaking. Then Naya stepped close and pressed something into his palm. It was her carved pine shard, the one she'd nailed to his fence post, the one that summoned an entire tribe to his doorstep. You keep that, she said, so if you ever need to call us. He looked at the carving. No one's ever ridden for me before, he said. They did this time. That evening the tribe rode out. Not in formation, not as a war party, but as survivors. Nia rode near the front, her braid swinging behind her like a banner, the documents tucked safe beneath her coat. Her father rode beside her. Elijah stood on the porch and watched them go. As the last riders vanished into the trees, he exhaled, long and slow, and looked out across the land. The ranch was damaged, 2 windows shattered. The barn roof would need patching. His ribs ached like hell, and his leg was going to keep him limping for weeks. But he was alive. More than that. He was part of something again. The fire was low inside. The coffee tin sat open on the table. A second cup rested across from his, untouched. He didn't put it away. Instead, he left it where it was. Because sometimes people came back, and when they did, he'd be ready. The West had always been a place that tested men. Not with storms or bullets, but with the choices no one saw. The ones made at the edge of midnight, when no one else would know if you turned away. Elijah Cain had made one of those choices. He'd stood still while the wind howled, while the lawmen lied, while a girl no one was supposed to save clung to life on his porch. And from that moment, everything changed. He learned that blood didn't make you kin, that silence could be louder than a gunshot, and that justice, real justice, didn't ride on a badge or come stamped with a seal. It walked in worn boots, carried in the hands of those willing to risk something they couldn't replace. Naya didn't just return to her people. She returned to the world. And Elijah, the quiet rancher who didn't ask questions, was no longer a man apart. He was part of a story now, one carved in fire and memory, and the promise that sometimes, the smallest act, a door opened, a lie refused, a name remembered, could tilt the world. He watched the horizon and waited. and if trouble ever came calling again, he'd be ready.